Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be in English, and tonight we will talk about defining success for projects. My name is Gabriele Filieri, and I'm a volunteer of the PMI Northern Italy chapter. I'm part of the development team, which is the team supporting professional development through a number of initiatives, such as the organization of international webinars. I would like to welcome Scott Burtness, who will be our speaker tonight. He is from the US, in particular from Minnesota, but before starting with the webinar, let me give you some useful information. So first of all, if you have questions, I kindly ask you to use the proper chat window. You can send your questions at any time during the webinar. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. Attending this webinar gives you the opportunity to get one PDU split between leadership and strategic. And finally, you will receive an email just after the webinar to complete the survey and express your opinion about the webinar. It will take you only 5 minutes to do it. Okay, now I'm going to introduce briefly the webinar topic. Managing a project to the traditional success metrics of scope, schedule, and budget can result in a well-executed project that fails to solve the original problem. Scott will provide straightforward techniques for defining success. And just a few words about Scott. His experience goes from the public to private sector and includes multiple industries, including manufacturing, automotive, professional services, higher education, and IT. He's now working for Sciforma, which is a PPM software company, as customer success manager. And he is also an excellent writer. Okay, now Scott, I'll hand it over to you for your presentation. When you are ready, you can start. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and good evening. Actually, good morning for me. As Gabriele mentioned, my name is Scott Burtness. I live in Minnesota in the United States, and I currently work for a software company that provides project portfolio management software. So I know that Gabriele already mentioned a little bit about my background. Just to give a quick highlight, so I've got about 25 years of professional experience. I have worked in both the private and public sector. As he mentioned, I worked across a number of different industries. And in all of my roles, I've always had a very customer-focused role. So I've always been really deeply involved in how the end user of a tool or the recipient of a product or a service is going to benefit from that tool or that product or service. So my current role is really focused on that. When I work with customers, it really is around helping them with organizational change management and how they can integrate their tools and processes and focus on things like user adoption of their new tools or really maximizing their return on investments. So I thought that talking about project success would be a really good topic because I've seen what happens when projects have really nicely defined scope and are managed to a good schedule, are kept within budget, but fail to actually solve the problem or the need that was identified when that project was first started. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. I'm going to go through just some of my thoughts on defining success and then what to do after you've done that. And at the end, I'd be happy to take questions and talk a bit more. So for the presentation, I'll keep my camera off just so we can focus more on the content. But today's agenda, pretty straightforward. We'll take a look at how you define success for a project. We'll take a look at how you can establish milestones and action plans that align with your success definition, as opposed to your project milestones that line up with your scope. We'll discuss the idea of organizational change management in context of a project. Talk a little bit about how you can prepare your project's outcomes for success and how they can be sustained over time. And then we'll take a look at how you can measure success to make sure that the outputs that the project delivered actually solve that original problem. What I thought was a pretty interesting data point came out of a Gallup survey that was done a few years back. And it found that only about 2.5% of companies really felt that they completed all their projects successfully. So again, it's really what I thought was a pretty interesting data point that underlines the importance of really defining success for a project. So let's go into this first piece, project success definition. The first question we should ask is why? Why bother to define success for your project? How is that different from describing what the project should do or accomplish or produce? And there really are two main benefits to defining success for the project. The first one is to create that understandable and unifying vision for the people that are going to both work on the project and also be impacted by the project. If you can create that unifying and understandable vision, it's going to help make sure that your project meets the need, actually solves the original problem, even if there end up being changes to your scope, schedule, or budget. So really defining that success is what's going to help make sure that all the work is laser focused on solving the problem, and that any changes that come your way, you can react to and adapt to more effectively because you still keep your focus on that successful conclusion of the project. So I tend to think of defining success as looking at three different ingredients, really, to put it together: strategy, objectives, and benefits. So to break that down, strategy is going to be your company's detailed plan for success. So, typically a company is going to have a mission statement, and then there's going to be some strategic objectives for the company. It's really focused on what's going to deliver the value and benefits for the company. So when you're thinking about success for your project, it's really important to take into consideration what is that company's overarching strategy so that you can start to assess how your project is going to support that strategic goal. The next piece of a success definition would be to start to drill down to specific business goals that the company has. These are going to be objectives that are going to support that strategy. This is where you start to get to much more quantifiable things that you can use to describe success for your project. And again, you can start to measure and weight these business goals as in terms of how much they support the company's overall strategy. You may find that some projects in an organization very clearly align with the company's strategy. If the company designs tennis shoes and sneakers, and there's a project to create a new brand, a new logo, a new style, you can see how that fits directly into the company's strategy of expanding its market or increasing its sales. When you look at other projects in the company, there might be a project to change email servers or replace telephones or update the cubicles in the company. It might be harder to draw a direct line between how new cubicles in the company are going to help the company realize its strategy of increasing its market share or increasing its sales. But that line and that connection is still there. So when you can start to look at your project and what's going to constitute success for your project, and you can start to think about your project's objectives, understanding how strongly aligned they are with those strategies is a really good way to start to understand the importance of that project's success and how it's going to benefit the company overall. And then these objectives are usually also going to be time constrained. So objectives, these business goals, they might be quarterly business goals or annual business goals. But again, the goal here is really to understand strategy and then start to understand the specific objectives that would help deliver on that strategy. And then there's the third ingredient, the benefits that should be produced. Again, these are things that should be quantifiable and measurable. We want to see an increase of 10%. We want to see a decrease of 15%. They can be positive or negative. Sometimes you don't actually realize benefits. The project may end up not being successful and have an adverse effect. But the more that you can start to identify the expected benefits of the project's outcomes, the better your ingredients will be for your definition of success for your project. And then you start to put these elements together. So after thinking about the company's strategic goals and starting to identify the specific objectives that you'll need in your project to help reach those goals, understanding how strongly related those objectives are to that company strategy, and then identifying the expected benefits that you would want to produce with your project. You want to start putting that together in a way that's going to be a little bit more like a story. It's going to really describe a destination with the goal of answering the so what question. If we deliver this project, so what? Who cares? What's changed? What's better? As you're thinking about how you can answer that so what question, you want to try and make that success definition something that's going to really excite people or really get an emotional response from them. And that's where action verbs can be really helpful. This project will be successful when it accelerates, it delivers, it executes or expands, when it helps resolve or surpass. That language that really excites and energizes somebody is really important to put into a success definition. And we'll start to understand why when we get a few more slides in and start looking at how scope and success are different. So let's talk through just a brief example, again, of how scope and success really start to focus on different aspects of the project. And we have just a hypothetical situation where there's a company called ABC Wellness Healthcare Provider. And leadership has decided that the company needs to do some updates to its website. And one of the projects that's been identified is a redesign of the website's navigation. The need for this could have come from customer feedback. It could have come from some website analytics. But we've decided that we need to have this project to improve navigation on the website. And as we're defining the scope, we're going to be focusing on things like site menu reconfiguration. That's definitely going to be in scope. We're going to change the menu and how it's laid out and organized and architected. Understanding the scope is also going to help us figure out what we don't need to do with the project. So for example, we're not going to make any changes to our style sheet. We're not changing the colors or the look and feel of the website navigation. We're not going to be adding any new content at this point. It's all going to be the same content. We're also not going to be removing any content. So this project scope is really describing what the project will do and also helping us understand what it won't do so we can stay really focused on what needs to be achieved. So that is a way of really describing the project and its expected outcomes. But it doesn't really excite you when you hear that. It doesn't really help you understand what problem is being solved. It's not something that you would want to run down the hallway and cheer at the top of your lungs when you achieve it. That's what we look to a success definition to help us understand. So for example, after understanding the scope of the project, we could go on to say, this project will be successful when the site's navigation experience accelerates the visitor's path to their desired information. So that's an objective that we can identify so that they can receive a richer experience in 15% fewer clicks. Now we started to quantify a benefit. And we could see a 10% increase overall in site user satisfaction. That could align with the business goal or strategy. A good experience will ensure our customers trust ABC Wellness to support their health and well-being. So now we've taken this specific project, this very simple project to update a website's navigation, and we've made it exciting, we've made it quantifiable, and we've indicated how it's going to support some business goals and also tie in to our company's mission. So again, when you put them side by side, describing scope, very important. We want to make sure that we have as much specificity as possible so that the team knows what to execute on. But when describing success, we want to take a different direction with it. We really want to try and make something that people are going to hear and have an emotional reaction to, and also give them something they can look at and benchmark and measure so they can understand that the project has actually solved that need, has actually resolved the problem. The defining success exercise can definitely take some time early in a project and may need to be updated multiple times throughout the project as you learn more. It's very important to try and bring a lot of stakeholders into those conversations. It could be obviously your project requester or the person that's championing or sponsoring the project. You may have some senior stakeholders like a governance team that you want to engage. You may want to be reaching out to some of the customers, some of the people that are going to be impacted by the project's outputs to bring in their feedback and go through a number of iterations with this, with the goal of really trying to put together a fairly concise and again descriptive success definition, because at the end of that exercise it's really important that you share it. The more people that you can really engage with your success definition for your project, the better. And there are a lot of different ways that you can share this success definition. One opportunity is just in your team meetings. When you're having a meeting with the full team or with parts of the team, even if it's just a targeted session with the technical lead, starting that meeting by just rereading your success definition, refocusing on what it is you're trying to achieve, can really help get everybody's head in the right place for that meeting. Sometimes meetings can be really challenging if the project's having a lot of issues, or it's confronting a lot of risks, or you have some stakeholders that are in disagreement and are wrestling back and forth. If you've invested the time in putting together a good success definition, it can really be a good way to re-energize your team and get everybody to move past some of those immediate problems and really focus on that destination that you're all trying to get to. It's something that could be added to your project status reports. Depending on what you use to produce your status report, putting that success data into the footer or into a sidebar on a status report does a really nice job of putting all that project status information into context for that report recipient. So you're not just telling them if something is red, amber, green, or if you're starting to see some scope creep, or you're starting to see some slippage in your schedule. You're helping them understand how those project status indicators relate to that destination you're trying to get to with that project. Stakeholder presentations. I always recommend using the definition of success for the project as a bookend for the presentation. So begin the presentation by rereading and focusing everybody on that definition of success, what problem you're trying to solve. Do your presentation for your stakeholders, and then at the end of the presentation, reiterate that success definition. Refocus everybody on why that project was approved in the beginning and what you're trying to do to make things better for the company, the customers, etc. And then finally, even as the project manager, you can start to think about how this may need to be communicated downstream to stakeholders. We're going to be talking a little bit about change management further into the presentation, but one of the really important aspects of managing change in an organization is helping people understand why the change is happening in the first place. So after you've created that definition of success for your project, if you can start to find a way to package that and get it to the people that are impacted downstream, you'll actually save a lot of time and effort and energy further down the road as you start to manage that change in the organization. So we've covered this idea of defining success for a project, why it's important, and what some of the basic ingredients could be in that success definition. Understanding your company's strategy and business goals, identifying the objectives and how they align with that strategy, and identifying the benefits that you want to produce. And then putting that into that story to help describe what success is going to look like at the end of the project. Now we want to make sure we can break that down into actionable steps that the project team and project stakeholders can take. Just like when you take your scope and do your work breakdown exercise and start to figure out what tasks and activities and initiatives need to be completed to deliver on that scope. Or if you're doing an agile project and you start to figure out what your releases or your epics are going to be and what backlog items need to be fit into your sprints. The same type of exercise can be done with your success definition. You still want to be focused on milestones, moments in time that demonstrate that you've made some significant progress toward that definition of success, and action plans, things that you can do to help ensure you reach those milestones. But when breaking down milestones and action plans for a success definition, it's going to be a little bit of a different exercise than what you would do for scope. Success milestones typically are going to be measured toward objectives, not toward your scope. So again, those objectives are going to be those measurable, weighted goals that you have. Your success milestones should be something that elicits more of an emotional response. So as the project reaches that milestone, it's not just describing a moment in time when something's been completed. It's describing a moment in time when something has been achieved, and the team can get genuinely excited about reaching that milestone. And those success milestones, it's also really important, just like the definition of success itself, that you're getting that validated by multiple stakeholders in the project. You want to make sure that your project sponsor, your steering team, champion, tech lead, etc., that they're all focused on those same success milestones, because reaching those is something that everybody should be able to be excited about and be proud of, from the folks executing on the tasks all the way up through that project's senior leadership. And then you want to start thinking about those action plans to help reach those success milestones. So I think the most important component is that those action plans are designed to be more purpose-driven rather than requirements-driven. We're not looking necessarily for a work breakdown structure here. We are looking for the ability to enable and empower people to drive us towards success. As you're thinking about what types of actions need to be taken to help move us toward those success milestones, it's really important to try and be on the lookout for assumptions. I think that that's a good rule for any aspect of a project. We always want to try and make sure that we're not blindsided by assumptions. But with success action plans, it's really important. Just assuming that somebody else is in a position to execute, or that they already have the knowledge or the tools or the resources to execute, can really undermine actually being able to reach those milestones. So as you're thinking about the various actions and activities that need to be put into place to reach those milestones, make sure that the people that you're asking to do that work really do have the knowledge, tools, support that they need, that you've got that good understanding. Just watch out for any assumptions you might be making. Better to clear it up than to risk having that come back later and undermine what you're trying to accomplish. And with success action plans, as opposed to just doing work breakdown, for your team to deliver on scope, when people are executing on tasks in a project, a lot of times it really relates to their technical skills, their ability to perform a specific job. And you want them to perform that job in a high quality way so that they can finish their tasks in a timely manner, deliver the expected outputs. Success action plans is going to be a little bit different. What we're looking for here is empowering enablers. We're looking for people that we can give a little bit more of perhaps an entrepreneurial spirit to, so that they aren't necessarily focused on the execution of details, They're focused on motivating to reach a specific goal. So again, let's look at our ABC Wellness Company and compare our scope milestones to our success milestones, just to put this in some context. So again, with scope, we want to be updating this website navigation. So some scope milestones might be we've completed the cross mapping of the original menu options to the new menu options. Or another scope milestone could be that we've completed the navigation architecture requirements traceability matrix. So these milestones describe moments in time where we have reached something important in the journey, but it's very focused on the requirements and on the scope of the project. Not that that isn't exciting in its own right, but you know, finishing the requirements traceability matrix is probably not something that everyone's going to jump up and start giving each other high fives. But if we look at something like a success milestone, that cross-mapping exercise for the original menu navigation to the new menu navigation, or putting together that new architecture of what the navigation will look like, what that actually translates to is the number of clicks to reach the most popular content has been reduced by 15%. That really does indicate a moment in time when the project has achieved something significant. We have reached a goal that directly ties into this project being successful. Another example might be that all of the navigation traps that had existed before, where a user all of a sudden finds that they have no option other than to return to the home page of the website. If we can find all those navigation traps and eliminate all of them, we know that that's a really important milestone because that ties directly into our user satisfaction and their ability to navigate that website quickly and effectively to get to the content that they need. So just like the scope and a success definition are different, in large part because that success definition focuses on an emotional response. The same is true for our milestones. Our scope milestones are very descriptive and align with our requirements. Our success milestones are very emotional and designed to really excite people about what we're achieving with this project. So just in summary, even though it may sometimes feel like this is a lot of effort to put together, and you're not entirely sure if you're going to get a lot of buy-in, oftentimes company cultures can be very focused on just get it done. If you can make this part of your initiation and planning for your project, really focus on bringing people into these conversations, really focus on putting together that success definition, I think you'll find that it is going to help you keep your teams motivated, really keep your stakeholders focused on the why of the project and not get buried in the details. And it's going to give you some really great moments during your project execution to genuinely celebrate what you're accomplishing, as opposed to simply marking off what you've been able to finish from your requirements list. So the next piece of this, we've been talking a lot about how important it is to define success and get people excited about what the project is trying to deliver. And that's because what we're actually delivering is change. And the more that we can do to get people excited about that change, the easier it's going to be to manage that change when it arrives. So change management. I'm of the opinion that every single project is going to introduce change. That's the whole point of a project, is that we need to have that unique endeavor to produce some new good or new service. We have to do it within a certain time frame and definitely try and stay on budget. But ultimately, what we're doing is we are creating change. And as a result, change management should always be in scope for the project. Even if the project manager isn't going to be the one responsible for managing the change that that project will produce, the project manager should still identify that change management is part of the project. And if you're not getting a lot of support from the project leadership to start preparing for the change management piece, operationalizing that new IT system, or putting that new product into the markets, if that's not part of the project manager's responsibility, I would really encourage you to still identify it as a risk. That change management, if not handled appropriately, can really become a significant problem for what that project is trying to deliver. And then in your risk log, you can indicate that it's been transferred, and the person that you're going to be handing this project off to when you're completed, make sure that you can indicate that you're transferring that risk to them, because they need to take full ownership of the change management. But there are still things that you as the project manager can do to help ensure that your project and the work that you've put in to deliver this successful project has a fighting chance of actually solving the problem, being sustainable going forward. So we'll talk a little bit about that. First, just a quick note on organizational change management. There are a number of different definitions. One that I like comes from an organization called ProSci, and they describe organizational change management as the process, tools, and techniques to manage the people side of change to achieve the required business outcomes. So right away, you can already see how this ties into our project success definition. We're defining success by the strategy and the objectives and the benefits that that project is going to deliver for our company. And now we're starting to think about the people that are going to be involved in that, both on the project and also people that are impacted by the project. So this idea of change management is to incorporate the organizational tools that can be utilized to help those individuals make successful personal transitions and adopt and realize that change. So again, we really are trying to prepare people as much as possible for the change that this project may introduce. There is a lot of information around organizational change management. There are books, there are courses, there are certifications, there are workshops. If you haven't, I would really encourage you to start to learn more about it. It can really improve how effective you can be in a workplace if you really start to think about and understand organizational change management. But for me, what it really boils down to, very simply, is just having a little more empathy and learning to listen a little bit more to what people are saying. So oftentimes, a project might result in a new system, a new tool that the company is going to use to do its work. And you're always going to hear somebody say, everything was fine before. And when they say that, they might seem okay. They might not seem too excited about the change. They might not seem too disturbed by it. They keep a pretty good poker face. But if you start to peel back that onion and really dig into what they're actually saying, what they're probably saying is, I used to be an expert at my job. And now with this new tool or a new system, I don't know what to do. I'm at the same level as everybody else. Changes that result from projects of this nature maybe are going to result in more work, or may result in higher expectations for a performance review. So I think one of the most important things to think about with change management is that when change is introduced, even if you think it's a good positive change, there are always going to be people on the other side that are going to see that change coming down the pipe and be really nervous or concerned or worried about how it's going to impact them. So as the manager of the project, you can start to prepare for this. You can start to think about this. And again, the more that you can bake into your project, the easier it's going to be to hand off that project's outcomes to the people that are going to be responsible for managing that change going forward. So just some simple tips and tricks that can help with that preparation and that handoff. Communication. When it comes to preparing people for a project that's going to be delivered and how it's going to impact them or change how they work, I really like this idea of a bite, snack, meal communication strategy. So start with just small pieces of information pretty early in the process. Start to give people that little bit of a glimpse that the change is coming. And then as the change starts getting closer, you give a little bit more information. You give them more of a snack. And you're starting to describe how that change could be impacting or benefiting them. That way, when you get to the actual meal piece of the communication, this is going to be job aids, training materials, white papers, etc. They've already been made aware of the change. They've already had some indication of how it could impact them, and they have that good context for when the change actually arrives. It's really important as part of your bite, snack, and meal communications to reference that definition of success. So again, not just what the project is going to produce, but the problem that that project is going to solve. And the more that you can share and reshare that, the more people are going to actually get these different communication pieces and actually intake them and understand them and really react to them. Whenever you're managing change that's going to require that people do things differently, a change in process, a change in tools, a change in system, a lot of times it's easier to plan a big training initiative. But what usually ends up happening is that you will have people train and train and train for a full day or 2 days or a week, and then a month later they've forgotten most of what they learned in training. So for change adoption, it's always helpful to think about this idea of just-in-time training. So that way, you're using the knowledge more readily and you're more likely to retain it. And this idea of just-in-time training isn't just for delivering new tools or systems in an organization. It's going to be any change in process, expectations, where people go to get information. For example, if we are changing a website's navigation for a company, we want to make sure that we provide some resources that will give that user the tools they need when they need to do it, as opposed to showing them at a moment in time and then having a month go by before they need to apply that knowledge and they forget everything you've already shown them. Other important considerations for making sure that successful project that you deliver results in positive change, if you can start to identify who your change advocates can be. So as you're getting ready to deliver that project, if you can start to identify key people in the organization that are going to take those deliverables and make sure that they get acted on, and you'll really start to empower those change advocates, that can be a really helpful step to take. So again, you don't hand off your project and then all of a sudden have all that great work just start to wither on the vine. The last two, like incentivizing the change, trying to remove blockers, a lot of times this is going to fall outside of the project's purview. But as a project manager, if you can already start to think about and plan for the types of change, it's going to give your project sponsors a lot of really valuable considerations for how they can start to enact change management at their level. So, there may be things that they can do to provide incentives. There are probably a lot of things they can do to remove those blockers. So when you deliver your project, you've already smoothed the road and that project's outcomes can move forward more easily. And then you have this idea of sustaining that change. And for me, when I think about this, I always think of this as my project manager legacy. If I'm leading a project, I really want to make sure that the things that I produce and deliver from that project are lasting, they're durable, that a year later, 5 years later, somebody can look back and go, oh, that's right, Scott Burtness led that project. That was a great project. So it's always helpful as part of your project to think about what's going to help that project's outputs be sustained in the organization, so you can start to plan for that. And usually that exercise is really just looking at your company very honestly and trying to find the weak link. Where does your company tend to fall down when it comes to sustaining similar project outputs. Maybe you can find some similar applications or systems or similar processes or products that have been done in the past. Hopefully your company has some sort of a way to research lessons learned from earlier projects. But if you can start to look at where you think the weak links are, you can prepare for that when you're getting ready to deliver your project. So you can start thinking about who really should take full ownership and authority of those project outputs. So the things that you're looking to provide, who's going to be the person to own them and carry them forward? As you deliver your project and really achieve that success definition, does that project, do those outputs need to have recurring changes? Again, I've got a fair amount of experience in the IT world, so delivering applications and systems is pretty common. And oftentimes those applications are going to need to go into some sort of a maintenance schedule. They're going to need frequent upgrades or patches or things like that. You can start to account for that as part of your project delivery. You're better preparing that project to live on and be successful going forward. It could also be establishing a QA process during your project. So as you're looking at delivering those final deliverables, how are you going to ensure that quality is built into that process so that quality can be maintained going forward? And then finally, the end user preparation or the customer preparation, you're thinking about how you can prepare the people that are going to be impacted by that project and making sure that you have that as part of your plan can be really, really impactful for sustaining the project's change as it goes forward. So we've talked about the exercise of not just describing scope, what's in or out of scope, but defining success for a project. How does it align with strategy? What are the objectives that we're working toward? What are the benefits that it's going to deliver? And then we've talked about how to prepare for the change that project is going to result in and how to make sure that we can support that change going forward. At some point, if we really want to honor our definition of success, we should really go back and see if we were in fact successful. So to do that, it's as simple as going back to those benefits that we used as one of the ingredients for our definition of success and retesting. So ideally, when you're coming up with your success definition and you're looking for those quantifiable, measurable things, you're capturing those metrics. So again, we've got a healthcare provider doing some work on its website. We know that we want to maybe capture a baseline of the number of clicks per session that a user does when they're navigating the website, or how long that average session duration is for the user. We may have some site user surveys, and get some satisfaction surveys. As part of our success definition and part of our success action plan, we should be planning for a retest. So how much time is reasonable before we think we're going to see those benefits? Should we see them fairly quickly, maybe 3 months after the project is delivered? Or is it going to take more time? Do we need to wait for a year? Whatever that time period might be, we want to make sure that part of our project plan includes not just delivering that project, but also planning to go back and retest to make sure that we've achieved those benefits and we can see how close we came to hitting those targets. I wanted to put in a couple of notes about satisfaction surveys because they really are, I think, good tools to measure success of different initiatives. Couple of tips. Surveys, as much as possible, try and keep them short. If you want to get a lot of people to give feedback, you'll get more feedback from more people if you can make that survey 10 questions or less. Make it something that they can just knock out pretty easily. Obviously, different things might require more in-depth surveys, but as a general rule, you'll get more responses if you can keep it a bit lighter. Oftentimes, you can choose if you want to use like a linear scale, maybe a very unsatisfied to very satisfied type scale. And we're kind of hardwired to think in terms of 1 to 5. We always like seeing those, give it a 1 to 5 star rating kind of thing. When doing surveys, I would really encourage you to use a 1 to 4 scale. So 1 could be very unsatisfied, 2 could be unsatisfied, 3 would be satisfied, 4 would be very satisfied. What that does is it takes away that middle ground, that I don't really have an opinion response. By using 1 to 4, you're always going to find out if somebody has a negative or a positive response. They don't really have the option to just shrug and say, I don't know. And then finally, think about using different surveys. If we were looking at website navigation, there may be some different aspects that we need to consider. Some of that navigation might have been to get to health articles, so people could learn things about how to take better care of their health. Other navigation could be getting to appointment scheduling tools. Those are going to be two very different experiences. So you want to make sure you have surveys that are designed to measure both of those experiences. And then when doing satisfaction surveys, try not to be too vague. You'll really try and make your questions fairly specific. I recommend working with maybe your communications team or whatnot to make sure that you're not writing up a survey that's trying to fish for good responses. You want to try and get honest feedback. You don't necessarily want to try and just get someone to say good things. The real power of measuring your benefits is getting honest information. And always make sure that you are checking with the appropriate people in your company before you choose a survey tool or platform. There are a lot of tools out there that you can do surveys with. Some of them might actually be free, but the trade-off is that they're collecting a lot of data from you and your company. So before you put together a survey for your project and get ready to send it out to your team or your customers or your stakeholders, make sure you're double checking with the appropriate people in the company that you're using an appropriate tool. So just to recap, again, I think that the idea of defining success for the project really is important. It definitely does go beyond scope, schedule, and budget. It's helping you understand the problem. It's helping you understand that desired solution. And it's giving you something that people can really respond to in a very emotional way, so they can be excited when you deliver that project. Just like you're going to break down your scope into your milestones and your work breakdown structure, or again, your releases and your backlogs, you want to take that success definition and identify some key milestones and action plans to help you get there. As you're working toward this definition of success, be mindful of the fact that you're going to be introducing change. And if you can start to plan for and include that organizational change management as part of your project, that's a really great way to make sure that your project is going to be durable and lasting, and that what you deliver will add benefit for a long time to come. If you aren't able to do that change management planning as part of your project, definitely identify it as a risk and figure out who you're going to transfer that to so you don't lose sight of it. And then finally, after you deliver that project and you really want to go back and validate that it's been successful, make sure that part of your plan includes when you're going to go back and retest those success metrics. So with that, I'll wrap it up. I hope that this was some helpful perspective on how to approach your projects. And if folks have any questions, I would be happy to go through them.
So thank you, Scott, for your presentation. Really appreciate your experience and passion you have for project management. I think we have some time for questions. So the first question Andrea is asking, it's about project scope. Many projects fall short because the out of scope is not clearly expressed in the project charter, and the project sponsor and stakeholders instead think that it is actually included in the scope. So in your opinion, how important is to define the out of scope part of the project, and how important is to start a journey with your project sponsor with a clear understanding of what is not included?
I personally think that it is critical to call out what would not be in scope for a project. I know that this can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable, trying to tell somebody maybe further up in the company what you're not going to do. But I think it's important to find out those areas and make sure you're in agreement. One of the worst things with delivering a project is having somebody come back and say, I thought you were going to do X, or I was expecting you to do Y. And in almost every case, what they're talking about are things that you as the project manager had assumed were out of scope. So just like you want to come to agreement on what you are going to do with the project, it is really valuable to say, here's what we're not going to do. And a success definition is a great way to start to identify what really should be in scope versus out of scope. Because what you're doing with that success definition is, again, you're really describing and defining what success is going to look like when that project delivers its expectations. And when you start to describe that, it starts to become pretty apparent what the scope should be and also what isn't going to be included. Again, very simple example for the presentation, but if our success definition says we're going to accelerate the visitor's path to their desired information, when you're going through that with your sponsor, they're going to say, that's great because we've got a whole bunch of new content that we want to put up on the website. Oh, that's interesting. As the project manager, I didn't realize we were going to be including adding new content. I thought we were just going to be improving navigation to existing content. So by having that success definition and having that conversation, it can help you identify those potential gaps in understanding between you and those project stakeholders.
Okay. So another question from Enrico. He's asking, even though having a unique project vision for all project members is ideal, isn't that a little bit challenging to achieve?
Yes, and especially with larger, more complex projects, and especially when you don't have the benefit of like fully dedicated project teams. Oftentimes in like matrixed organizations or loosely matrixed organizations, it can be difficult to really even have that full sense of a team working on the project. There may be pieces of the project that are being sent to different departments in the company, and you're not even sure who is going to be delivering that piece of your project. So yes, putting in the time and effort and getting people to come to some agreement on what success looks like, it can be challenging. And I know how hard it is when you are feeling pressure from the company to start producing results. So, start working on the project before we've even had a chance to finish the charter. Start working on the project before we're even entirely sure how much money we have to do the work. I would still encourage project managers to at least try and come to some sort of definition of success for yourself. If you're not getting a lot of support or buy-in from other people with your project, even if it ends up just being something that you have for yourself to refer back to, I think you'll find that having that success definition is going to help you be more clear when you go into meetings and interactions with your team. It's going to help you be more focused when you go to present for your stakeholders, because you'll have in your mind what it really is that you're working to accomplish. So I think that there is a spectrum of how formal or informal you want to be with a success definition. Obviously, the more formal you can be, where everyone collaborates, puts it together, and you are able to share it and reshare it, that's wonderful. But even if it ends up just being something that you as the project manager have for yourself, it really can help you just stay much more focused, keep good perspective, communicate more clearly, and help ensure your project will not just accomplish what it set out to do, but actually achieve those goals and solve those problems.
Okay, I think we still have some time for a couple of questions. So Marco is asking, most IT projects are driven by the IT department, and sometimes the business department is involved at a later stage, affecting their perception of success. So do you have any hints on involving users in the business department at an early stage to help define success?
Yeah, for that, I would really start to think about those success milestones and then the success action plans. Oftentimes, the process might be that you get your technical requirements, you start breaking the work down, you start getting your team working on it, and you've got those scope milestones that you're working toward. But at some point, you should also be planning for the quality. So, when is testing going to occur? When is rework going to occur? Who's involved to help develop those test scripts? Who's going to be doing the actual testing? And when you start thinking about the test scripts and the test process, that's usually where you start getting closer to the end users, closer to the business customer of that IT project. So that, I feel, is a really good place to start thinking about success milestones. Keep your technologists really focused on executing on the requirements. After I write this line of code, when you click this button, that red light is going to turn green. As they're working on that technical outcome, and you start working with your business stakeholders, you can start asking, when that red light turns green, so what? What's different? What's better? What problem have we solved? So I think that as you're working on that very technical project, when you start getting into the quality piece is a really good time to really start focusing on those success metrics.
Okay. So Alessandra is asking if a project's success can sometimes be affected by resistance to change. Can this resistance undermine the project's success? Okay.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And in my current role with a software company, I see it happen over and over and over again. You can have the best success definition in the world, and then when you deliver that project and it hits reality, it's really easy to see where things can start to fall apart. So, it comes back to the idea of what can you as the project manager do in preparation for that? How much can you put in place to ensure that when you hand off your project, that change is already starting to be planned for and managed? I talked a bit about the idea of bite, snap, meal communications. When putting together your project artifacts, hopefully you've got a little bit of a communication plan for the project during its execution. Who needs to be kept informed? Who needs to be involved in decisions, etc. If you can take the extra effort to expand that communication plan to start to anticipate those end users and the people that are going to be impacted, that's a really good way to start to prepare for that potential resistance and get ahead of it. Ultimately, as the project manager, if your goal is to be able to go back and measure success, or if your company sponsor is going to be going back and measuring success, anything that you can do as part of your project to start to prepare for or stage those plans, those communications, the better. It's not 100% guarantee that your project outcomes will be accepted with open arms, but at least you can get those wheels turning and get those good processes started to help the organization prepare for that change the project will be delivering.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much. We got more questions, but I think we don't have time to go through them all. So thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience. Let me remind people that they can, they will receive a survey, and so I really encourage them to to do the survey and send us the results. Okay, thank you so much again, Scott, for your time. Thank you all for attending this webinar. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great holiday and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye-bye.